Coming up tonight, the Prime Minister announces a 2-week lockdown for Grand Bahama. And the Defense Force officer taken to court charged with rape.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, Grand Bahama is set to head into a 2-week lockdown. The announcement was made by Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, who insisted that strict measures are far from desirable but absolutely necessary given the fact that Grand Bahama has been labelled a COVID-19 hotspot by health officials. Jasmine Brown reports.
The Prime Minister announced that lockdown and other restrictions just outside Cabinet this morning as he insisted they are necessary to clamp down on the rapid rise of COVID-19 cases in Grand Bahama.
I am announcing today that after consultation with health and other officials, including officials on Grand Bahama, that Grand Bahama will be placed on a 2-week lockdown in order to slow and control the community spread of the COVID-19 virus on that island. This lockdown will take effect beginning Thursday, the 23rd of July at 7 p.m. until Friday, the 7th of August, 5 a.m.
Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis announced the lockdown just days before it is set to begin as he highlighted the record-breaking surge in COVID-19 cases on Grand Bahama over the last few days as the reason for the more restrictive measures.
The island has been classified as a COVID-19 hotspot by health officials.
The Bahamas has reported more than 70 new cases of COVID-19 since July 8th. More than half of those cases were reported on Grand Bahama. Prior to that date, the island had only 8 reported cases of the virus. The Prime Minister foreshadowed that a lockdown was possible on the island when he addressed the nation on Sunday. However, he said on Tuesday that health officials recommended he implement the lockdown as soon as possible. Also included in the restrictions is the halting of domestic flights in and out of Grand Bahama.
Effective this evening, the 21st of July 2020, at 6 p.m., all domestic flights in and out of Grand Bahama will cease. I also want to remind you that the Defense Force have been informed and Defense Force have formed a perimeter around Grand Bahama so as to avoid any boats from leaving Grand Bahama to any of the adjacent family islands, especially Bimini and New Providence.
Based on the new restrictions in Grand Bahama, there will be a complete lockdown in place on Saturdays and Sundays. The Prime Minister said residents are only permitted to leave home if they are essential workers or facing an emergency. Among others, essential workers include medical staff, media, members of the uniformed branches, some government workers, and security staff. During the lockdown, food stores will be permitted to operate on weekdays from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pharmacies, water depots, and gas stations will be permitted to operate on weekdays from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. The Grand Bahama Humane Society and waste disposal and sanitation companies will be permitted to operate Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Minnis said it is imperative that residents adhere to the rules. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Grand Bahama residents are reacting to that 2-week lockdown. Some express disappointment while others welcome the strict measures.
I saw a lot of look of anxiety in the eyes of a lot of those persons. And while I was talking with most of them, they don't know where we go from here.
That's how Grand Bahama resident Lionel Morley described some Grand Bahamians he passed as he and hundreds of others shopped earlier today. Morley says despite many concerned looks, he saw hundreds of people preparing themselves.
I've seen people in line, looping lines, preparing themselves for the inevitable, which is the lockdown.
We had to go through it during Hurricane Dorian. The first time the lockdown happened in Grand Bahama, I think that was in March and April, and now again.
28-year-old entrepreneur Tarante Lang says the 2-week lockdown is a disappointment, even though it wasn't surprising given the sharp spike in cases. But Lang, the owner of 3 businesses, says there is an undeniable price to pay.
Regardless of us being open or not, we still have to pay the same rent, the same power, the same gas bill. So it's now just less revenue that we're going to have coming in, but we're going to have the exact same expenses.
Lang says many Grand Bahamians appear to preempt the Prime Minister's announcement. He says long lines at grocery stores started early this morning. He added that he understands why many people are trying to get to the store as soon as possible.
Persons are panic buying as is expected. They feel as if there's a shortage when it comes to a lot of the supplies in the food stores. And to be quite frank, in Grand Bahama, I can understand why they would react that way, because you'd see an item on the shelf today and then you wouldn't see it again maybe until another 2-3 months.
Another Grand Bahamian, 35-year-old Lester Dawkins, is a straw vendor by profession. He supports the lockdown and says that it didn't come as a surprise.
It's a kind of not shocking at all, but it's something that has to be done.
Things have been tough for Dawkins and many other Grand Bahamians for a while now. Several hurricanes over the years culminated with the passage of Hurricane Dorian. Many homes are still in need of major repairs, and Dawkins thinks this is a chance for his fellow residents to focus on rebuilding and repairs.
I think persons really protecting their home and getting it back to a comfortable state is where everyone's focus really should be.
Well, Opposition Leader Philip Davis said it's the many missteps by the government following the reopening of the country's borders that placed Grand Bahama in this predicament. Kyle Joaquin has that angle.
Davis says what makes things worse is that after his statement, the Prime Minister would not take any questions pertaining to what's happening in Grand Bahama as well as here in Nassau.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Taking no questions from the press, Minnis walked away after his statement outside Cabinet Office Tuesday morning. But with pressing questions like Grand Bahama's capacity to handle the surge in cases, given the state of the Rand Memorial Hospital, Davis said if the Prime Minister won't give answers, then who?
We need to understand what is our testing capacity in the country. I am worried about Grand Bahama because we know that the hospital down there, the Rand Hospital, has been compromised.
On Monday, Tourism Minister Dionisio de Aguilar said the spike in cases is homegrown and that in hindsight the government may not have been strict enough on Bahamians going in and out of the country. Davis called that an admission of failure.
I pointed out yesterday that to permit travel to hotspots, hot zones, and to have Bahamians exposed for a minimum of 72 hours without testing on return was folly. That was the protocol that they put in place.
Bahamas was praised by some international observers weeks ago over its handling of the pandemic. Minnis has since reiterated those kudos, saying other countries around the world applauded the Bahamas' handling of the pandemic. Davis now saying the Prime Minister pat himself on the back too soon.
We fell down. The government fell down somewhere along the line. And now what is happening? The sacrifices that have been made over the many months by Bahamian people have now gone up in smokes. This is not a time for self-congratulatory praises. This is not a time for self-patting on one's back. The virus was always here.
In the end, Davis says the Prime Minister's persistence on making announcements but not answering questions doesn't help the situation.
The Bahamian people need to know who has the answers. We don't have it in opposition. We're seeking it, but again, we're seeking it to be able to help the situation.
For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, an officer of the Royal Bahamas Defence Force and his brother were charged with a rape at the magistrate's court this afternoon. Giorgio Bain has the details.
Family members were teary-eyed outside of court as officers of the Central Detective Unit escorted Defense Force officer 26-year-old Yorick Bryce Jr., seen in the red, and his younger brother, Maximus Bryce, seen in the blue, age 19, into court. The brothers were charged, along with a 17-year-old juvenile, in the magistrate's court in relation to a rape that occurred at a party on July 12. Two 19-year-old women reported the incident to police. This resulted in the arrest of the Defense Force officer and his brother. The Bryce brothers were represented by attorney Bijan Ferguson. They were not required to enter a plea to the charge and were remanded to the Bahamas Department of Corrections. The juvenile, who was represented by attorney Nathan Smith, was remanded to the Simpson Penn Juvenile Facility. Bryce has been placed on suspension from the force pending the outcome of the charge. The trio returns to court on October 21st for the presentation of a voluntary bill of indictment, which will fast-track the case to the Supreme Court. Reporting for Our News, I'm Georgia Bay.
Still to come on Our News, turbulent times ahead for Bahamas Air. Plus, the Prime Minister clarifies his comments on public servants who may need to quarantine. Stay tuned. The financial situation at Bahamas Air taking a nosedive following the cancellation of all U.S. flights, and according to the airline's chairman, the only way the airline can survive is if government increases its subsidy. Berthy McDermott reports.
The COVID-19 pandemic dealing a serious blow to Bahamas Air as the airline is now experiencing a 73% reduction in daily seats, according to Executive Chairman Tommy Turnquest. His comments came hours after the Prime Minister announced that all flights entering and leaving Grand Bahama are to end at 6 p.m. today due to a 2-week lockdown on that island.
Last summer, we operated 2,838 seats a day. This week, we are operating 884 seats a day. That's a 73% reduction. It's a huge reduction.
And that's not all. Turnquest added that Bahamas Air is still reeling from that $8 million loss in revenue from Hurricane Dorian. Additionally, according to Turnquest, for the 2019-2020 fiscal year, which ended in June, the airline suffered a dramatic dip in revenue, going from $90 million to $70 million. With this grim financial situation, he added that the only way the airline can survive is if government increases its subsidy. Government previously indicated its intention to provide a subvention of $19 million in the fiscal year 2020-2021. Turnquest said this subvention can only service the loans for the ATRs.
We were going to cut our cloth to fit the suit. We understood that. And so we were looking at revenue enhancements, and we were looking at cost containment to operate under that. But we have a personnel cost of $2.1 million a month that we've got to find.
Noting that the recent cancellation of U.S. flights, along with the removal of flights to Grand Bahama for the next 2 weeks, will impact the national flag carrier, we asked the chairman just how many people will be impacted by the move.
This is a very fluid situation, day by day. The Prime Minister gave a national address at 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon and saw it necessary to make a further address at 10 a.m. this morning. My job isn't to speculate on what he's going to say next or what's going to happen next. I've got to deal with the situation as it is presented to me.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Thanks, Berthany. Well, the Prime Minister seeking to clarify comments he made about public servants who may need to quarantine. During a national address on Sunday, Dr. Minnis said returning Bahamians and residents who do not have a negative COVID-19 test will be required to self-quarantine for 14 days. Minnis said the quarantine period will be counted as vacation for public servants, adding if vacation time is not an option, the public servant's salary will be deducted. Today, he insisted the measure will be enforced to ensure those who travel take personal responsibility.
To be clear, this applies only to those required to quarantine upon returning from travel abroad. who do not have the required COVID-19 negative test result. This applies only to those who had traveled into a hotspot area, taking on their own responsibility, subsequently becoming infected and traveling back to the Bahamas, requiring quarantine. That responsibility had been placed on themselves.
Dr. Minnis added that the policy does not apply to other circumstances where quarantine may be required by health officials. On Monday, President of the Bahamas Public Servants Union, Kimsley Ferguson, said he felt the Prime Minister's announcement on public servants who may have to quarantine was too broad.
This is an opportunity now for us to view exactly what would happen if someone was at work and were to contract the COVID-19 virus. And we're of the view that that would be more associated with an industrial accident as opposed to somebody taking vacation.
The Public Hospitals Authority and Sandilands Rehabilitation Centre have announced that effective immediately visiting hours have been suspended at the Sandilands Hospital and Geriatric Hospital until further notice. Outpatient services inclusive of rehabilitative services, dental services, beauty salon and the adult psychiatric day patient program have also been suspended until further notice. Officials say this measure has been implemented to ensure the safety of patients and staff during the COVID-19 crisis. The Anglican bishop addresses new restrictions. That's coming up when our news returns. Welcome back. While encouraging congregants to continue to observe safety protocols, Bishop Leish Boyd acknowledged that the lockdowns and measures to stave off the spread of the coronavirus have been difficult. Nonetheless, he told parishioners to bear through it as it is the only way back to some level of normalcy. Julian Gray has that.
The lockdowns and curfews were burdensome. The restrictions were sometimes suffocating, but we made it through. But bear in mind, it was all for our benefit and well-being.
Difficult and suffocating is how Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of the Bahamas, Bishop Leish Boyd, described the lockdown measures. In a message to parishioners on Monday, Bishop Boyd commended congregants on their adherence to the measures and encouraged them to continue to follow guidelines.
Let us continue to observe strictly the protocols laid down. It is tedious, it is tiresome, but stick to it, because protocols will prevent spread and save lives in the long run.
The Anglican Church resumed services several weeks ago with a number of safety protocols in place. However, church attendance has dwindled. Bishop Boyd said members should be encouraging of those who are not yet ready to attend services. He, however, added that persons should not get so comfortable with the lockdown measures that they stop coming to church.
We all know that laziness and habit can creep in so easily, and before we know it, months and even years have gone by, and we are not where we should be. Bear in mind that many of us go many other places. I'm not blaming or accusing anyone, just challenging us honestly to find our comfort level.
Those with comorbidities have been encouraged to stay at home and stay safe using one of the church's virtual platforms. With coronavirus cases hitting a new grim milestone, some churches are moving back to online-only practices. Senior pastor Bishop Neil Ellis told congregants of Mount Tabor Church that because of the soaring cases since borders opened on July 1st, the church will revert to virtual services only.
Out of an abundance of pastoral care and caution, that we have taken the decision to once again suspend all in-person worship experiences with immediate effect until we feel led again and assured that it's safe again to resume public worship.
Weddings and funerals will still be conducted at the church in adherence to safety protocols. Reporting for our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Thanks, Jillian. Well, still to come, Good Samaritan save a family from eviction. Stay tuned for that. A mother of two who pleaded for help as her family faced eviction is expressing her gratitude to those who came to the rescue of the family. She said her husband, who has stage 3 colon cancer, is now resting a little easier as he no longer worries about where his family will sleep. Jillian Gray reports.
After sharing her story of near eviction this past weekend, Amika McKenzie said the outpouring of love and support from the community has been overwhelming. Once filled with despair, she said now a dark cloud has been lifted.
My spirit has been very much uplifted because I know the last time you was here, you could see how I was feeling very down. But now my spirit has been very much uplifted because even with persons even called from my island in Meguana, and I wasn't expecting that. And they told me that they're going to have a concert at the church, and they're going to do cookout, and they're going to try and raise funds to help with my family. And I've had people call me all the way from United States.
Minutes after her story aired on Our News Saturday, McKenzie said the phone rang off the hook. Her story, which has been shared on Facebook over 400 times, captured the hearts of many. She said one of the first calls she received was from the pastor of Life Changers Church, who offered to pay her rent in full.
It's been crazy with joy and happiness for me and my family. And I just give God thanks. I just give God all the glory, and everybody who came here, I just thank you all so much. You all know who you all are. Some of you all tell me don't call your name, but you all know who you all are. I just thank you all, and I love you all.
Not only is she breathing a sigh of relief, but McKenzie said her husband is as well. Unable to work due to a surgery to remove a tumor, McKenzie said he was stressed about their situation. Now, with the stress of living accommodations gone, the pair is focused on fighting her husband's stage 3 colon cancer.
I had people calling me to pray with my husband, pray for my husband, and people was telling me, said my husband is gonna be fine. He's already free from cancer. And Pastor Valentino Williams from the Life Changers Church, he prayed with me, and he told me, he said that my husband is going to be free from cancer. And I accept that, and I believe it, and I have the faith.
A few business owners have requested a resume from her, and McKenzie said she is praying one of those job prospects pans out. She encouraged others who are going through a hard time to continue to trust in God. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Thank you for joining us for Our News Tonight. To catch our news on the go, download the Rev Go Play app. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm Jared Higgs. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.